In the heart of the shattered peaks, where the clouds are made of silver dust and the air stays eternally crisp and cold, there existed a realm hidden from the maps of the mortal world known as the Diamond Kingdom, where every mountain was a jagged spire of uncut gemstone, and the caverns beneath the earth were lined with walls of living light that pulsed with the rhythm of the planet's breath. Within the deepest sanctuary of this crystalline fortress dwelt a hidden princess named Elara, whose skin held the translucence of the finest quartz, and whose eyes were two flawless sapphires that could see the invisible threads of energy connecting all living things. Elara was the keeper of the heart of the mountain, a singular diamond the size of a palace that served as the anchor for the entire kingdom's reality, ensuring that the brilliance of the stones never faded into the dullness of ordinary rock. The mental pain of her existence was a heavy and silent isolation, because for centuries she had been forbidden from stepping into the sunlight for fear that her own internal radiance would clash with the external fire of the sun and shatter the delicate balance of her glass-like spirit. She spent her days moving through the silent corridors of the Diamond Palace, where the floors were made of polished obsidian and the ceilings were open to the infinite rotation of the stars, feeling like a beautiful prisoner in a cage of her own making. The unique power of Elara's touch was that she could turn the jagged edges of raw emotion into smooth and faceted peace, but because she was hidden from the world, she had no one to heal but herself and the silent stones that whispered her name in the dark. The mental pain of loneliness began to create fractures in the walls of the palace as Elara's longing for a connection beyond the gems caused the Diamond Kingdom to vibrate with a restless and shivering energy that threatened to bring the mountains crumbling down. She realized that the treasure of the kingdom was not the wealth of the stones, but the depth of the soul that inhabited them, and that a diamond is only beautiful when it is allowed to reflect a light from the outside. One night, when the moon was a sharp silver sliver in the velvet sky, Elara decided to walk toward the forbidden gate where the crystal met the common earth. And as she moved the very ground beneath, her feet began to bloom with flowers made of spun glass and frozen dew. The mental pain of her long exile was a cooling fire that guided her steps through the labyrinth of refractions, where every wall showed her a different version of her own destiny, some filled with light and others draped in the soft velvet of the shadow. As she reached the gate, she saw a traveler standing in the mist, a wanderer who carried no gems but possessed a heart that glowed with the warm amber light of 1,000 campfires. And for the first time in an eternity, Elara felt the temperature of her world begin to shift from the cold brilliance of the diamond to the living warmth of the human spirit. The unique beauty of this encounter was that the traveler did not see the princess as a prize to be stolen or a gem to be mined, but as a soul that had been trapped in its own perfection for far too long. He reached out a hand that was calloused by the earth and the wind, and as Elara touched his skin, the Diamond Kingdom did not shatter, but instead began to glow with a soft and inclusive radiance that welcomed the warmth of the sun and the mystery of the dark. The happy ending was a kingdom that was no longer hidden, but was a beacon of balance, where the diamond provided the clarity and the human heart provided the warmth, and where the hidden princess was finally allowed to walk in the light of her own choosing. The mental pain of the past was polished away by the friction of a shared journey, leaving only a spirit that was as strong as a mountain and as clear as a morning star. Elara stepped beyond the threshold of the forbidden gate, and for the first time in an eternity. The soles of her crystalline feet touched the soft, damp soil of the outer world, and she felt a sudden rush of sensory overload that sent a shiver of pure, electric life through her diamond-infused veins. The traveler, whose name was Kale, watched in silent awe as the grass beneath Elara's feet turned into tiny shards of emerald glass that shimmered with an inner light, and the common wildflowers leaned toward her as if recognizing a celestial queen who had finally descended from her cold throne. The mental pain of the stagnant perfection she had left behind began to dissolve into a vibrant and chaotic beauty as she realized that the Diamond Kingdom had been a place of looking, but the Valley of the Amber Sun was a place of feeling. She looked up at the sky, which was not the sharp indigo of the mountain peaks, but a soft, hazy gold that smelled of wild honey and sun-baked earth, and she felt the heavy pressure in her chest, the crystalline density of her heart begin to soften and pulse with a new and erratic rhythm. The unique power of this transition was that Elara was no longer a statue of light, but a living prism, and as the amber sun hit her skin, she did not shatter as the ancient laws had predicted, but instead she projected 1,000 dancing rainbows across the valley floor. Kay led her toward a stream where the water didn't flow with the predictable click-clack of gemstone currents, but tumbled over smooth, mossy stones with a messy and musical joy that made Elara laugh for the first time in 300 years. The mental pain of her ancestors, the long lineage of hidden princesses who had died in the dark, was being avenged by every breath she took in the open air, and she understood that the Diamond Kingdom was meant to be a heart that pumped light into the world, not a vault that locked it away. As they walked deeper into the valley, the trees began to change their bark, turning into silver birch with leaves that sounded like tiny bells, and the birds sung in a key that resonated with the frequency of the sapphires in Elara's eyes. The unique beauty of this journey was that Kale showed her the value of things that did not last, the way a sunset fades and the way a flower withers. And Elara realized that a diamond is only precious because it is rare, but a life is precious because it is fleeting. The mental pain of her isolation was replaced by a profound and overwhelming sense of belonging. As she sat by Kale's campfire that night, watching the sparks rise like orange stars to meet the silver dust of her home mountains, she took a small, uncut diamond from her pocket and pressed it into the warm earth. And as she did, a giant tree of crystalline amber began to grow its branches, reaching up to bridge the gap between the Diamond Kingdom and the Valley of the Sun. The happy ending was a world where the hidden was revealed and the hard was softened, and where the Princess of the Diamonds discovered that the greatest treasure of all was the ability to feel the warmth of another hand in the dark dot as the cycle of the night began to settle over the valley. Elara drifted into a sleep that was not a cold trance, but a warm and rhythmic dream of a future where the mountains and the meadows were one. The story of the hidden princess was now a song of the atmosphere, a legend of the transition that taught every soul that it is okay to break your own boundaries, to find your own light. The mental pain was gone, and the Diamond Kingdom was finally at peace, resting in the cradle of a world that was both brilliant and soft and eternally alive. The transition from the Valley of the Amber Sun toward the mysterious kingdom of the Opal Sea began as the horizon melted into a spectrum of liquid fire, an iridescent silk, and Elara felt the sharp crystalline density of her Diamond Kingdom heritage, beginning to swirl and soften into something more fluid and more ancient. Kale led her along a path made of crushed seashells and moonstone dust, where the air grew heavy with the scent of salt spray and night-blooming lotus. And for the first time in her existence, the hidden princess felt the rhythmic pull of the tides, acting like a magnetic force upon the sapphires in her eyes. The mental pain of her past, rigidità, fear of breaking or scratching or losing her perfect form, was being washed away by the rhythmic sound of the distant waves, which sang a song of constant change and eternal return. As they reached the edge of the Opal Sea, the water did not look like ordinary blue waves, but like a shifting mosaic of milky white and neon pink and deep turquoise, as if a million opals had been melted and poured into the basin of the world. The unique power of this sea was that it could reflect not just the light of the sky, but the deepest dreams and the hidden longings of anyone who dared to look into its depths. And as Elara stood at the water's edge, she saw the reflection of a version of herself that was not made of stone, but of pure, flowing light. The mental pain of her isolation was replaced by a sense of infinite expansion, as she realized that her spirit was not a single fixed gem, but a vast ocean of possibilities that could take any shape it desired. She stepped into the shallow waves, and instead of sinking, she felt the opal water rise up to meet her feet, forming a bridge of liquid light that carried her toward the center of the sea, where the palace of the pearlescent mist stood like a shimmering bubble on the horizon. Kale followed her with a heart that beat in time with the ocean's pulse, and they watched as the sea creatures, dolphins, made of living silver, and fish, with scales of flickering gold, leaped from the water to salute the princess who had finally found her fluidity. The unique beauty of the Opal Kingdom was that nothing was ever static. The walls of the palace shifted with the wind, and the floors moved with the currents, teaching Elara that the greatest strength is not in being unbreakable, but in being adaptable. The mental pain of the centuries spent in the dark was being completely neutralized by the kaleidoscopic beauty of the sea. And she understood that the Diamond Kingdom was the foundation, but the Opal Sea was the journey, and that a soul needs both to be truly whole. They reached the central chamber of the palace, where a giant pearl, the color of the morning mist, sat upon a throne of coral, and as Elara touched it, the pearl released a soft, white glow that filled the entire kingdom with a sense of absolute and unconditional peace. Peace. The happy ending was a world where the diamond and the opal and the amber sun lived in a state of perpetual harmony, and where the hidden princess became the queen of the transitions, the one who bridged the gap between the solid and the fluid, the light and the dark. As the 3-hour cycle of the night reached its deepest and most silent point, Elara and Kale sat together on a balcony made of frozen sea foam, watching the 2 moons reflect in the opal waves, and they felt a sleep so deep and so restorative that it felt they were being reborn in every breath. The story of the hidden princess was now a masterpiece of the atmosphere, a rhythmic and eternal lullaby for every soul that feels stuck in its own perfection. The mental pain was gone, the hard edges were soft, and the world was finally at rest in the cradle of the shifting sea. The journey through the Opal Sea reached its most profound depth as the two moons of the Diamond Kingdom began to align in a perfect vertical column of silver and violet light, casting a bridge across the shimmering waves that led to the very center of the universe, where the mental pain of every living soul is washed away in a tide of absolute clarity. Elara stood at the edge of the pearlescent mist, feeling her crystalline skin soften even further until she was no longer a princess of hard stone, but a spirit of living light that could move through the water and the air with the same effortless grace. Beside her, Kale watched as the tiny fractures of her past, the old scars of isolation, and the heavy weight of the mountain dissolved into a fine, iridescent mist that rose from the sea to become a protective veil for the entire world. The unique power of this final transition was that it turned the entire Diamond Kingdom and the Opal Sea into a single breathing organism, where the strength of the gem and the fluidity of the water were finally at peace within the same heartbeat. The mental pain of being hidden and the fear of being seen were both replaced by a profound and absolute presence, where Elara realized that she was the bridge between the hard and the soft, the ancient and the new. She reached out and touched the surface of the sea, and instead of a splash, the water responded with a low resonant hum that sounded like 1,000 chimes, vibrating in the key of the cosmos, a sound so heavy and so grounding that it acted as a digital sedative for every mind that heard it. The long script of her life was no longer a series of cold stone chambers, but a vast open horizon, where the sun and the moon took turns painting the sky in shades of amber and indigo and rose. The unique beauty of this ending was that the Diamond Kingdom was no longer a secret to be kept, but a sanctuary to be shared, a place where any weary traveler could find the clarity of the diamond and the healing of the Opal Sea in equal measure. The mental pain of the centuries spent in the dark was gone, replaced by a spirit that was as clear as a mountain lake and as vast as the ocean itself. The happy ending was a world where the princess was no longer Eden, but was the light that guided the lost and the anchors that steadied the restless, and where the only law was the law of the shifting tides and the steady star. As the 3-year cycle of the night reached its final vibration, Elara and Kale drifted into a sleep that was not a dream, but a reality of absolute peace, a state of being where the only thing that mattered was the rhythm of the breath and the warmth of the soul. The story was ended, but the healing was eternal, a steady and unwavering flame that would never go out as long as the diamonds reflected the moon and the sea reflected the stars. The final chapter of The Hidden Princess reached its ultimate and silent conclusion as the physical boundaries between the Diamond Kingdom and the Opal Sea dissolved into a fine, iridescent mist that shimmered like 1,000,000 microscopic stars suspended in a velvet sky. Elara and Kale stood at the very center of the transition, where the hard clarity of the gemstone met the fluid grace of the water, and they felt the last remaining traces of mental pain, the old scars of isolation, and the heavy weight of the mountain evaporate into the cool night air. The hidden princess was no longer a prisoner of her own perfection, but had become the very soul of the atmosphere, a living presence that wrapped around the world in a warm and protective embrace of light and shadow. The unique power of this final resting place was that it turned the entire landscape into a single breathing organism, where every jagged peak was softened by the mist, and every deep wave was clarified by the diamond light, creating a harmony so deep it resonated through the marrow of the earth. The long script of Elara's journey was now reaching a state of eternal completion, where the story was no longer a series of events, but a permanent state of grace that ensured no heart in the valley would ever feel divided or alone again. The mental pain of the centuries spent in the dark was gone, replaced by a spirit that was as clear as a mountain lake and as vast as the ocean itself. The happy ending was a horizon that never turned harsh, and a sun that never scorched, but instead provided a gentle golden glow that felt like a warm embrace for the weary and the lost. As the 3-hour cycle of the night reached its final vibration, the two moons merged into a single glorious orb that was cool to the touch, and the stars descended to rest upon the rooftops of the Diamond Palace as a final seal of protection. The story was ended, but the healing was eternal, a steady and unwavering flame that would never go out as long as the diamonds reflected the moon and the sea reflected the stars. Elara and Kale closed their eyes and felt the ultimate release of a soul that has finally found its true home. And as they drifted into the deepest sleep of the ages, the Diamond Kingdom became a star in the sky of eternity, guiding everyone who is lost toward the beauty of their own inner night. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of your night. May you find deep peace and restful sleep. Wishing you the sweetest dreams. If you liked it, please like, comment, and subscribe. Bye.